This episode is brought to you by my Fertility Management Masterclass. Master fertility awareness and improve your menstrual cycle health at the same time. For details, head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. That's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 133. Welcome to the 133rd episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm really excited to share today's interview with you. I had a great interview with Mama Natural, Genevieve Howland, and we talked all about birth, natural birth. We shared our birth stories and pregnancy, healthy pregnancy, things to do for preconception care as well as to do throughout pregnancy. And one of the interesting topics that came out was about choice and being able to make informed decisions about the interventions that you want or the things that you might not want. So it's a great conversation that we had. And if you're new to the podcast and you're looking to find out more about fertility awareness, so some of the topics that we cover on the show, we talk a lot about fertility awareness and not just using it for birth control or trying to conceive, but also what your menstrual cycle can actually tell you about your overall health. For those of you who've listened to the show for a while, you'll have heard me say that the menstrual cycle is the fifth vital sign of your health many, many times. And so if you're looking for specific information about fertility awareness, I've recently segmented those episodes out to make them easier to find. And so you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/fertility awareness, and you'll see the list of all the fertility awareness specific episodes dating back to the first couple episodes that were highly focused on the actual method itself. So I get a lot of questions, especially in my private Facebook group, about fertility awareness. And so for those of you, again, who are new, I would love to invite you to join our private Facebook group. It's a community that I host for women who listen to the show and who are just wanting a space to be able to talk about fertility awareness and to talk about some of these topics that otherwise we don't really have a place to talk about. So I would love to have you in there. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/community to join us in there. And without further ado, let's hop into today's interview with Mama Natural. And today I'm very excited to have Mama Natural on the show, Genevieve Howland. Genevieve, who you probably know as Mama Natural, has shared hundreds of funny but informational videos that empower millions of women to embrace natural pregnancy and parenting. And her YouTube channel gets over 1 million hits every single month, 1 million video views, which is incredible. She's just released her first book, The Mama Natural Week-to-Week Guide to Pregnancy and Childbirth, which is a great resource for mamas to be, coming from more of a natural perspective, a perspective that I appreciate that recognizes that pregnancy and birth are normal and that having a baby is a wonderful biological process and rite of passage, but not a medical condition. And so I really appreciate that. In today's show, we'll be delving into her book and talking about what inspired her to share all of her insights and general awesomeness with the world. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Genevieve.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm super excited for you for your new book. I've had the pleasure of taking a peek at your preview copy, and it's gorgeous, but it definitely looks like a labor of love.
It really was. And I knew I wanted to get on your podcast because, you know, you talk and speak to these women about birth and about pregnancy. And I never thought I would write a book, to be completely honest. I'm a video YouTuber. You know, I would so much rather do a video than write a blog post. But I really wanted to write this book because it was not available. I wish it was available when I was pregnant. You know, when I was pregnant, I was really looking for a week-to-week format because that's just how my brain works. I just want it in small, digestible chunks, but also from that natural perspective. And so I did buy a bunch of pregnancy books because we all do that the first time around. And a lot of them were really emphasizing the medical model of birth and the interventions and more of like the fear component of what could go wrong or what this symptom could be or da. And I knew that there had to be a better way or just, you know, and lots of women have written awesome natural pregnancy and birth books, but I wanted to create one that was in that week-to-week format that was just makes it easy for moms to kind of track along with their pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you definitely did accomplish that. And I even want to take it back a little bit further. What inspired you to start your YouTube channel in the first place? So how many years has it been going for?
Let's see, like 7 years.
Wow.
So yeah, when I was pregnant with Griffin was when it started. Yeah.
So yeah, I want to hear that story. Where
Sure.
did it all start out?
Yes. Well, I married my husband and we kind of did our thing and traveled and stuff like that for a couple of years. And then we're like, okay, we want to have kids. And he actually was reading an article in like a Wired magazine or something about YouTubers and how some of these people that's like their careers and they do it as a family. And he always has had like an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think I have too. We both grew up, our dads were entrepreneurs and like my brother's an entrepreneur. So maybe we just saw people that didn't go to the office every day and we kind of wanted that. And so he's like, wouldn't it be so cool if we started a YouTube channel and like we could just do that and it'd be so fun. And he had video skills. Like he actually had a blog and a vlog before anyone even knew what a vlog was. And he traveled the world for 14 months and like documented it. So he had like the video editing skills and everything. And I love to be in front of the camera. When I was a kid, my dad, of course, got the camcorder and my mom and my brother were like, get that thing away from me. They were more introverted and they just did not want to have any part of it. And of course, I was like, I'll do it, And so I think I probably honed some of my camera skills, although, I'm not saying I'm great on camera per se, but like I felt comfortable even from a young age just because I had experience with it. And so that's how it came together. And we just started doing videos once I got pregnant with Griffin, and I saw how there was women on YouTube that were just it was almost like a diary. So it'd be like, okay, I'm 14 weeks pregnant. Now I'm 15 weeks pregnant. And then all these women, we kind of clustered together because we were all due around the same time. And there's so much joy and excitement with that first pregnancy. And that's really how it started. We just did a weekly video about the pregnancy. And there's so much, content with that. And then it just kind of organically grew from there. And that's pretty much how it all started.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then what inspired you to take more of the natural approach?
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am a former junk food junkie. I used to be 60 pounds overweight. I used to food was like my drug of choice, kind of like an alcoholic with alcohol. But for me, it was sugar. Like white sugar is like not for me. I literally am allergic to it basically. Because when I have one cookie, I want the whole box. You know what I mean? Where most people could have a cookie or two. I had no idea what that meant. So anyway, I had this history of overeating and by God's grace, I stopped those behaviors and I haven't had refined sugar for how many years now? 18 years, which is truly a miracle. And it's all because of God. But anyway, so that was my background. Because I had gone through that journey, I lived a pretty clean life. Once I cleaned up my food, then was like, okay, I don't want to be using toxic cleaning products because I would notice my lungs would hurt after I would clean the toilets, And then I was like,
fine if your lungs hurt after you clean the toilets.
Isn't that scary? I mean, literally, my lungs hurt. I'm like, something is wrong with this picture. Even regular toothpaste, there's a poison warning on it, so things like that. I started looking at my medicine cabinet and my beauty products. So it was just kind of this ripple effect. So anyways, when I got pregnant, a big thing too was my mom had cesareans and, I probably would not be alive today if it wasn't for that. So there's definitely a place for cesareans. Obviously, they save lives. But she had a huge scar because back in the day, they had a very different way of doing them. So I remember just seeing that as a kid and it was like, oh my gosh, that looks scary, And so I'm not a big fan of hospitals and medicine. And so that kind of was probably what motivated me initially is I wanted to avoid the hospital, avoid surgery. And then also just the idea of taking drugs. I was kind of a clean living girl. So that's what inspired me to do natural. But, it does kind of go against some instinct because it's who wants to endure pain, right? And to face, the pregnancy and the birth and to experience the intensity of those, feelings and the contractions and stuff. So it was a journey, and I think The Business of Being Born was huge to watch that film. That really opened my eyes. I love Ricki Lake. I think she's done tons of great work and just the whole natural birth movement. And I just took it one day at a time. It was just okay, we're going to try this. Okay, we're really going to do this. And the more I read about it, the more I learned about it. I knew that I wanted to give it all that I could, to try to have a natural childbirth, knowing that you never know how it's going to go. That's the thing. It's a mystery in some ways, but I was going to give it my all to try.
Mm-hmm. Well, since you brought it up, of course, I wanted to ask you about your natural childbirth because I also noticed in your book you talk about it. I like the way that you kind of talk about the different aspects of things in your book. you're not saying like, this is the right way or this is the right way, but kind of putting them out as options and just kind of going through those things. As you mentioned, some of the more kind of mainstream pregnancy books don't necessarily do it. They kind of lay out the way.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear about your birth experience.
Sure.
Experiences, because you have two children.
Sure. I mean, I wanted to bring in my personal experiences, because then people identify with story, you know what I mean? Versus just data or content or just clinical side. So yes, my first birth was very difficult. It was 27 hours. It was very, very painful. I had back labor. I was delirious by the end. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. When I get up, I'll deliver the baby. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. Like, what language are you talking? Like, that's not possible. And they kept saying, the baby's doing great. The baby's doing great. But I'm like, mama ain't doing great. Okay. Mama not doing good. I was literally losing it at the end. This was probably when I was in transition. I asked for an epidural at that point. I asked for a cesarean. I mean, and even after I had the child, I was like, Michael, I love having babies, but next time I'm going to get a cesarean. I mean, that's how traumatic it was for me. So it was very intense. It really brings you to the end of yourself, at least in my experience. And it is otherworldly. I don't know how else to describe it. Some women are really blessed. They have an awesome birth. They have short births. I had friends that had births. Their first birth was 4 hours, 6 hours. I would have loved that. Mine was 27. I did not get the easier way. But I think it's a blessing because it informed all the work that I did. And for my second birth, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do things a lot different with my second birth because I knew I could not walk through that journey again. And I talk a lot about in the book what you can do to potentially have an easier birth. You know what I mean? And some of it is just as simple as getting your mind game down. Or for me, my spiritual game. For other people, that might not be an interest to them. But for me, it was like getting my spirit in the right place, getting my mind in the right place. You have to have like a mental game walking into natural birth. Okay. And also, some of my girlfriends, they say, oh, I'm going to try. I'm just going to try to have a natural birth. And with that attitude, like, nah. I mean, it's just not going to happen probably, because when the going gets rough, it's so easy to say yes to an intervention because it's just so intense. And I don't think women realize that as they walk into birth. There's so many mixed messages because with Hollywood, you see such dramatic, traumatic births that where the women are like delirious and they're screaming like they're, going crazy and stuff like that. And then there's such a mystery about birth. It's so locked up. So you either get the Hollywood version or you get this mysterious thing that no one ever talks about. So, what is it really like? And I try to unpack some of that in the book. And then just, again, give women tools, like different exercises that you can do to keep your pelvis in a good position. Why did hundreds of years ago, did it seem like birth was easier? Because of some of the way that our modern world and the trappings of the way we sit with our lazy boy recliners and we're in our cars all day or we're at a computer all day. That is not how the human body was designed to be for 8 hours a day. So anyways, I try to empower women to give them tools. It's not going to guarantee that you're going to have this magical 4-hour birth, but at least it's footwork you can do. It certainly can't hurt, and it could very well help. So my second birth was awesome. It was supernatural. I almost didn't make it to the birthing center in time. I could literally say that it was pain-free. And I know that sounds weird, but I mean, there was definitely discomfort. There was definitely an intensity, but it was not painful. It was seriously joyful. I mean, when I delivered the baby, I was so in awe of how easy it was. I was like, that was an awesome birth. I didn't even pay attention to my daughter. I know she's going to look at the film and be like, thanks, Mom. Because I was kind of like, oh yeah. And then I've had this baby, but I was just so in shock because the first birth was so different. So there can be a different way to experience birth. And that's what I want to help women know about, learn about, and just embrace, basically.
Well, I'm so glad that it's a topic that you tackle head on. I think it's really important to have these types of conversations about birth to release some of that fear around it, just as you had spoken about. And I think one of the messages that I shared at the beginning of our podcast was that I really love the message. It resonates with me. Like, pregnancy is not a medical disease. And similarly, birth is not necessarily a medical emergency. So birth is a natural process. And so for my 2 babies, as my listeners know, I had both of them at home.
Good for you.
My eldest son was born in his bedroom in a tub. So there was nothing else in it at the time. He came a couple weeks early, so we didn't even have his crib set up. But I was in a birthing tub in his room, and then my youngest son was born in the kitchen again in a birthing tub.
That's so awesome.
Well, and
did you have long births or short births?
Somewhere in the middle. I think whenever I hear like I had a baby in 3 hours, I always want like more of the backstory, because what do you count as the birth? So some women will say like I had like a 52-hour birth, and so they're looking from the first contraction. So for my eldest son, if we're talking about from the very first contraction, it was actually about 23 hours, but I didn't know I was in labor. That first contraction, yes. I had no idea that was an actual contraction until like retrospect, but the active labor didn't really last that long.
That's awesome. Good for you. Good for you.
Well, and I wish I could say that there was like no pain involved and the birds were singing and whatnot, but I felt it. What I can say and what really resonates with me about what you're talking about is that mental game piece to really, in my kind of silly way, what I would say is like, it's like the not freaking out. Like if you can have strategies so that you don't freak out, so that you can stay focused and stay calm and keep breathing, and you have your birth partner, whoever that is, to support you in that and to help you when, because you will freak out at some point. Transition's a good place to freak out. But to help you stay calm and focused, and like to really organize yourself so that you can recognize that birth is not a medical crisis by nature. It's a natural process. I feel like to take some of the hysteria out of birth is really important. And I would love to hear your take on this as well. But, in my experience, birth has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then it's over. And then you have a baby, and that doesn't end. Parenting goes on forever. So I feel that all the fear and emphasis of birth takes away from some of the other important information that you could really use as a first-time mommy after the baby comes.
Amen. I mean, yes, I could not agree more. And that's what I was missing in my first birth, was the bigger picture. Someone reminded me, like, there is a purpose to the pain. There is a reward at the other end. It's almost like you get amnesia because you're so locked into your human suffering, you know what I mean? That you don't see the bigger picture. And I like what you said too, like with my second birth, first of all, I think you made absolutely a great point that like my second birth, I like to say it was 20 minutes. I mean, because in some ways it felt like it was a 20-minute birth, but it really wasn't, because I had, the earlier part of labor, but it was so manageable. It was probably like 7 hours of just deep breathing and, doing visualization. And I think staying on top of the contraction, staying on top of the breath, those are ways you can kind of manage it better. If you can stay on top of that contraction, stay on top of the breath. It's hard to, and I try to explain this in the book. And that's where the breathing exercises really come into play, doing birth affirmations. We are so geeked out about birth affirmations. We have affirmation cards. We've got, MP3s that we sell, because I think it's such a deal breaker. So stay on top of the breath. And I think too, it was really, I actually had 2 doulas in my first birth. Okay. So I was like surrounded by support. And then we had the conventional nurse, because we gave birth in a birthing center within a hospital. And I'm telling you, at the very end, she was who helped me. She kind of looked to me because I was like, I was losing it. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. She's like, Genevieve, she's like, look at me. You were going to do this. She's like, you were like 2 pushes away. We need to focus and let's do this thing. And it was almost like a slap, you know what I'm saying? But I needed it. I needed someone to like get me focused again. And everyone has a different personality. So some of us want the tender touch and the gentle voice. And what I learned through that is I need someone who's like more of a coach to be like, let's do this. Okay. You are so there. I think everyone else was so scared of me because I was so whacked out. Like my husband was like a deer in headlights. Like I think they were all just like, is she going to be okay? Where this nurse was like, no, you are going to do this. Let's do it. And then literally my spirit just came up and rose out and we did it. And it was like 20 minutes later, I think I gave birth to Griffin. So like you said, that mental toughness, that coaching, that realizing that in the minute you give birth, you have total amnesia that it was painful, maybe like for a week, I think I was like, that was really intense, but then it fades away and you do it again. And so, and the reward is so worth it. And the recovery, both of my births, we were eating takeout 10, 15 minutes after I gave birth. I'm walking around, and that's the blessing of a natural childbirth, or unmedicated, I guess, childbirth, is that you can go back to your regular activities shortly after birth, which is such a gift.
Yeah, no, there's so much. I feel like we could spend a lot of time here talking about birth. but I'm really happy that we're having this conversation, because one of the messages that I would love to come out of it is really you can do it.
Yes.
What makes me sad is how many women that really, even in passing, I'm sure you've heard the kind of jokes of, oh, I could never do that, or, oh my goodness, you had your baby with that, I would need the epidural. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with having all of the options and doing what makes you feel comfortable. So it's not about saying that there's a good, like a proper way, because,
yes.
In each birth, although I had a home birth planned, I'm well aware of the situations that would involve that, plan changing. So I had to be open to whatever happened. And so I was fortunate that I had my preferred way of birthing, but I also had to be open to like, well, if this baby decides to come at 34 weeks, the home birth thing is out of the window, right? So you have to kind of, but yeah, I feel like the message of you can do it. And so,
yeah.
So
yeah,
important.
I mean, and I think too, some of the motivations too, like some women, like I'm a health nut, I'm super clean with all, you know what I mean? Like I'm just on the fringe, but I try to speak to every woman, because like I have my husband's cousin, his wife, she's not very crunchy. You know what I mean? She tries to eat healthy, but she's not like way out there by any stretch of the imagination. But once she kind of heard about the birth and how you could do it like in a tub, and you had this you're like in a cozy, bedroom instead of like a clinical hospital room, she switched providers after just hearing my story at like 30 weeks, because she wanted a more comfortable atmosphere and a more just not so medically minded, experience. So that's the whole thing. It's a big spectrum, and there's a wide range of options of what it could look like. But I think it's what I try to do in the book too, is just like inform women of their choices. Because I think, for example, a lot of my friends, like I had lunch with like 5 of my high school friends, and all of them almost had pretty identical birth stories, in the sense that they tried to go and do the natural thing. And then I think they had gotten to, like it wasn't progressing. That's the classic. It's not progressing. It's not progressing. So then they got Pitocin. And then, they ranked up on the Pitocin, and then the Pitocin made their contractions really intense, really painful. And then they needed the epidural, because it was, rightfully so. It was so intense that they needed to and they didn't have, their bodies didn't naturally produce that oxytocin and the different things to help kind of manage the pain. So then they have to get, or they wanted to get an epidural, and then they get the epidural, and then it slowed down their contraction, and it's like this vicious cycle, and that we call it the cascade of interventions. And then they ended up in the operating room. The majority of my friends had cesareans. So anyways, in the book, I try to explain to moms, like, what are the consequences of having an epidural? What are the consequences of getting Pitocin? You know what I mean? And then they can make an informed choice, versus just the way you hear a lot of doctors is like, okay, this is a pain, numbing tool that you can use, which it is, an epidural. And sometimes it can actually prevent you from getting a cesarean for various conditions and stuff like that. But tell the whole story for those women, so that they make an informed choice and they realize the consequences. Just like with you with the home birth, you realize, there's a risk here. There's more of a risk than if I were to give birth in a hospital. Given, the way my pregnancy is low risk, and that I'm this and that and that, I'm going to make that choice, but I'm making it informed. That's what I'm trying, to get women, just so that they know the information, instead of, oh gosh, if only I knew, or, oh, I wish I, da, 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 da. So that's what it's about. It's not about saying you should all have unmedicated, perfect childbirths, No, it's about knowing your choices, being informed, knowing the consequences, and feeling good about the decisions that you make.
Well, and I just want to kind of throw in there, because I feel like I've been comfortable with the home birth idea since for so long, since way before having kids was even a blip on my radar. I knew that when the time came, that would be my kind of preferred option. And it's interesting, because if I were to speak about it with somebody, I would say, like, I actually think that it's less risky in a way if your pregnancy has been identified to be, you know what I mean? Like if all of the due diligence has been done and you've been screened. In my opinion, for me, it's actually more risky to go to a hospital for the exact reasons that you were talking about. More of the intervention, you know what I mean? Like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's more tempting.
Well, yeah. So I think, yeah. And what I love about the way that you kind of spoke about some of the aspects of not just the birthing process, but also even the screening testing that happens when you're pregnant throughout pregnancy. I really liked how in the sections you said, is this test for you? So kind of breaking down like, okay, so this is what's going to happen around this point in your pregnancy. And, you know, these are the tests that are done or whatever. This is why they're done. Is this test for you? So the very first time that concept of like, oh, you mean I don't have to do that was said to me was actually by my first midwife. And I remember because she presented each test along the way throughout my pregnancy as an option, where she said, that's awesome. The ultrasound is an option. And to that point, I hadn't thought about it as an option. I just thought everything was mandatory. So maybe you
had a great midwife. Yeah, you had a great midwife. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, you know, with the whole ultrasound, it doesn't, you know, getting that mid-pregnancy ultrasound does not improve maternal or baby mortality rates. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't improve, improve their their health, their health outcomes. You know what I'm trying to say? And yet it's like presented in a way that you have to do this. This is evidence-based. It's going to prevent XYZ when it really doesn't. The studies and the science shows that it doesn't. What it does help with is bonding for some parents. They feel more bonded to the baby by seeing the baby and seeing the little feet and the hands and this. And for some people, it gives them assurance or comfort or whatever. I chose actually to get a mid-pregnancy ultrasound. We talk about in the book, so you can look at all the evidence and you can make your choice. There are some consequences to it, and you get to make an informed choice. But yes, a good provider will present it that way. Everything is actually, pretty much every test from the diabetes screen to GBS to, are quote unquote optional in some way. You know what I mean? They're not mandatory. So it really is about you making that informed choice. And some women, frankly, they don't want to research and look at, so they just go along with, they trust their doctor or they trust their midwife and they just go along with their recommendations. And that's fine too. It's really what you're going to feel comfortable with. But even with the ultrasound, the thing that was nice with my midwife is she's like, you know what, if you just want to have one ultrasound your whole entire pregnancy, then try to get it. She's like, let's do it at 22 weeks, because what we sometimes find is at 20 weeks, some babies are just a little bit still underdeveloped. Some of the things are harder to see. So wait till 22 weeks. Then you're pretty much guaranteed that they're going to get everything that they need and that we don't have to do a retake, because that can happen. So little tips and tricks like that, and then the other thing is when the sonographer was doing her work, I was like, okay, let's just go quickly. I don't need pictures. I don't need souvenirs. You know what I mean? Let's just get in, get out, So like literally with my daughter, she did it for like 10 minutes. So it was like super fast. We got what we needed. We were out. So even that's a choice. Even that you can have a dialogue with your, provider. You want to be sure you feel comfortable with whomever you're working with, that you can ask these questions, have the conversations, and make your own choices.
Mm-hmm. Well, in some ways, I feel like we're backtracking. So we started with the birth, and now we're kind of going to go back into the pregnancy. But that's just how we're going to roll today. And so I'd love for you to take us. Obviously, we can't go through week by week, or we would be here until tomorrow. So I was thinking maybe you could kind of take us through what are some of the things that we need to know, like in each trimester. In the first trimester versus the second and the third. Yeah,
I would say in the first trimester. It's really about self-care, like super self-care, because this is the time that's most vulnerable. You want to be sure you're just getting tons of rest. You're taking really good care of yourself. You're eating well. You're really, hopefully before you even get pregnant or start to try to get pregnant, you're getting rid of bad or, parabens and different things in your beauty products and your cleaning products. You're doing a chemical sweep of your home, basically. And we talk about that in the book. What can you get rid of? Can you avoid GMOs? Can you eat organic when it comes to the heavily pesticide produce? What small changes can you make to have the healthiest womb for this new life? So I think the first trimester is kind of a continuation of that, of just living very cleanly, getting lots of rest, being sure your blood sugar is balanced, you're eating good amounts of protein and carbs and fat with each meal. And you're just kind of keeping a low profile. This is not a time to be taking lots of vacations or working long hours or drinking double, mocha frappuccinos or whatever, you know what I mean? Because your body is doing a lot of, really important work. That's the thing that's kind of scary is like some of like the heart's forming, the, genitalia, the brain, all these like really important structural things are being formed in those early weeks of pregnancy, the first trimester. So that would be my advice for that first trimester is just take it easy. It's a little weird, at least in my experience, when you first get pregnant, you're so psyched. And then you call the doctor, you call the midwife, and they're like, we'll see you at week 10.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Like I have to sit here alone in this unknown pool of anxiety for, no, I'm kidding. So I would just say, work on your, do your affirmations, get the cards or, listen to some soothing music, all those things just to really stay calm. And I always love to just talk to my baby, pray for my baby, because it's just a really precious time, that first trimester. And it's also a weird time because a lot of women don't share the news. They don't feel well. You feel horrible, and yet you can't tell anyone why. So that's also like a little awkward, although some women do tell right away. So it's really, again, a personal choice. That's what I would say for first trimester. Second trimester, I'd say enjoy yourself. Like this is the magic middle. This is where you get your energy back usually. You're usually feeling better. Any kind of queasiness is usually gone. This is where food tastes really good. I liked cooking and nesting and getting my house ready and so I say that's a great time just to really enjoy being pregnant. This is when your hair gets thicker, your nails are growing, you kind of have those benefits of carrying life. So I'd say just enjoy that middle trimester. If you're going to take a baby moon or some kind of little trip with your partner or, if you can even just go away for the weekend or something, this is a great time to do it. If you're going to travel, stuff like that. And then the third trimester, I'd say, hunker more down, try to stay close, kind of again, like the first trimester. And I would say from the very beginning, one thing that always to me is kind of devastating, not devastating, that's too dramatic of a word, but with gestational diabetes and then with GBS positive, which is group B strep positive, those are two things that are going to add complications to your pregnancies potentially. So, and your deliveries. So to be as proactive as you possibly can from the very beginning, keep your diet low sugar, not that you want to go on Atkins diet or anything like that, but, eat balanced meals, keep your blood sugar balanced. Don't indulge. I know, we can sometimes get these crazy cravings, but try to use healthier forms, like raw honey or maple syrup, but even those in moderation, because you don't want to set yourself up for gestational diabetes or the group B strep. And the same thing too, like take your probiotics if you get approved from your doctor or your midwife, or incorporate those probiotic rich foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, yogurt and stuff like that. So you're just keeping yourself in a good place so that when you get those tests, they're negative and it's no drama. Because, if you are positive for those, it can affect some of these things for a natural childbirth potentially. So that's what I also say is just take care of yourself so that when you get those screenings, if you choose to, it's just not a big deal at all. Yeah. And then the third trimester, I think for me, what was really important in the third trimester is being sure I was getting my activity most days. It keeps the swelling down. It keeps the fluids going through your body, keeps your lymph system moving, being sure you're getting enough fluids, getting enough protein. That was a big difference with my first pregnancy, my second pregnancy. In the first pregnancy, I took a Bradley childbirth course and they talked so much about protein. And they really were into it and saying get at least 80 grams. And frankly, I did not heed their advice. I was like, I eat balanced, I eat really healthy. I know I eat enough protein. I'm not going to worry about it too much. I probably would get more like 60 or 70 grams in a day. Anyways, fast forward 6 weeks before I gave birth, I did start to swell a little bit in the ankles and my hands a little bit. Nothing dramatic, but I did notice it. Fast forward the second birth, I, for whatever reason, really craved protein when I was pregnant with Paloma. So I almost instinctively just had a higher protein diet and ate probably more like 80 to 90 grams of protein. I had zero swelling, no puffiness. And I was more pregnant when it was hot and stuff, and I had no problem whatsoever. Just trying to, take care of yourself throughout the whole entire pregnancy so that you don't run into problems or issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there's so many important points that you mentioned there. I think that it can be just like what you said in the first trimester. I feel like you're so excited, but at the same time, I remember it just feeling so I didn't have morning sickness, so I'll just preface it with that. I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't know. But I had maybe one day where I felt kind of nauseous for a minute, right? Like,
yeah.
But then
Good for you.
At the same time, the first trimester, the whole time, I just wanted to sleep the whole time. So exhausted. Just felt like utter just crap, just the whole time. And then it's something magical happens, I don't know, in trimester 2. And all of a sudden you feel like, oh, like, and not everyone has that experience, because I know I have friends that did have horrible morning sickness until like the 5th month. And so the experiences can range so very dramatically, but it is nice to know in advance what some of the, possibilities are. And even just that reassurance to take that time to really relax and take care of yourself and not put a lot of pressures on you, because you don't know how you're going to feel. You really just don't.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just even with the exercise, not to like overdo it, like it's a fine line of staying active, keeping the body moving, but not stressing. You don't want to stress. It's not a time to go through some high stress situations or try a new big workout routine or do CrossFit for the first time or something like that. You can do that postpartum, but not when you're pregnant. Just be gentle, be loving, be kind, and treat your body well. And, most likely you'll have a natural, completely normal pregnancy and an uneventful delivery. Isn't that what we want?
Yes.
So,
well, and for the listeners who actually want more information about gestational diabetes, I did a really informative episode a long time ago. I have to look back to see what the episode number is. So I'll link it in the show notes page.
Sure.
A friend of mine, Lily Nichols, wrote a book, Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. And
nice.
she's a nutritionist, and in her book, she outlines the protocols that she used effectively. So to really minimize the need for medications. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, like it's just so it's so interesting how you can really make such a big impact on something like that with food.
Just diet and exercise. Something it can be very much managed with that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And that's awesome. We also did an episode together about exercise specifically during pregnancy. So given that these topics are seated in here, I'm just kind of let the listeners know for additional listening purposes if these topics interest you, because those episodes were really informative.
Awesome. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And the whole thing too, like with gestational diabetes, I remember when I was pregnant with Griffin, they've changed the way they test it even, at least in my world. And I think this is kind of becoming a universal thing that before with Griffin, I just had it like on an empty stomach by itself, drank the drink, and then got tested. And luckily I passed, but I mean, I think I was pretty close to not passing because that's not natural. I mean, you're sitting here downing this like pure glucose, you know what I mean? So anyway, so the second time I did with Paloma, I had it with eggs. My midwife said, you can drink this with a meal, only protein, don't have like oatmeal and eggs and this drink, just have some kind of protein and then this drink. So I had eggs with the drink. My blood sugar was like perfect, So even the way you test it now, you can do it in a way that's going to help balance it so it's not crazy. And then also I do know some women that follow more like paleo or real lower, like a lower carb diet. They sometimes can have false positive numbers just because their bodies are not used to consuming this really highly processed form of sugar. So working with your care provider, talking to them about this, making sure you can eat it with protein. Some women, even for a couple of weeks or even a month before they take the test, they might carb up a little bit more just to get their bodies a little bit more insulin, adjusted. So, there's always things you can do. Some women choose to not get the test done at all. You want to be careful with that because there can be more risks with birth and stuff like that with gestational diabetes. But like you said, it's something that can be really managed well with diet and exercise and keeping those numbers low so you don't have to go on medication or insulin or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in addition to the actual, I think I'm one of those women who didn't drink I didn't drink the glucose.
Yeah. Good for you.
From my understanding, there's like a simple blood test that they can do, and they often wait until later in your pregnancy to do it. It's called like the A1C blood screening.
Yeah. And it shows you how you've been managing sugars for like 3 months prior.
But they could also just do it in your first trimester and pick it up early.
Cool.
So that's something.
Yeah. That's cool.
So it's kind of like, maybe that could shift a little bit, because if you could just do the blood test in the first trimester, then maybe you wouldn't have to wait. Anyways, that's a whole other.
No, I'm the same way. Like with Group B strep, it drives me crazy because they test it at like 36 weeks. Okay, when you have basically no options, no course of, you know what I mean, and it's basically like, okay, you're positive, now you've got to go on antibiotics every 4 hours during labor. That's like the treatment for it. Where if you got tested very early, you're showing positive, then you could do some steps, reduce sugar, eat more raw garlic, bump up your probiotics, so that when you test at 36 weeks, you're negative. And the whole GBS is so weird anyways, because you could test literally 1 week positive and then a week later negative. It's a very fickle test. It's not 100% accurate. I mean, there's a lot of controversy with it anyways, but the results of it are pretty significant, you know what I mean? Because some midwives and doctors, I mean, they will mandatory have to get these antibiotics, which can set up a whole problem after birth with thrush and, yeast issues and stuff like that. So that's something I'm so passionate about. It's like, oh, I wish you could test early, but it's kind of the place where medically, if you're ever diagnosed positive, you're positive for the rest of the pregnancy. Like you can never not be positive. So again, it goes back to be proactive, like just act like you have it. Just eat the garlic, have the probiotics if you get the okay, or eat those probiotic rich foods, keep your sugars low. Then you never have to even go down that road. And it just makes your life so much easier.
Well, it's so helpful to know these things in advance. I feel like if you probably feel the same way. Like if you could go back and like dial the time before you had your first pregnancy, there's so many things that would have done, differently.
Yes.
One of the things that I wanted to chat with you about actually is your videos on YouTube, your YouTube channel. Yeah. So for the listeners who haven't checked it out, you're really funny, hey? You my husband would make fun of me because I said hey, because he's like, because I'm from Alberta.
I love it.
So he'd be like, oh, Canadian, blah, blah, blah. But anyways,
I love it.
But yeah, no, you're super funny. I love your videos, really playful, really energetic. I would just love to hear more about that. I've personally been afraid to do video, so I'm like putting it out there that I've been a little bit intimidated, like behind the mic is more secure or safe or something. I don't know, but
sure. Yes. No, I totally hear it. We get that a lot. People are like, how do you do videos? I'm terrified. Like we'll go to like blogger conferences and they're like, how do you do video? First of all, I love video because you connect in a heart way that you can't in some ways, I feel like. I mean, voice helps like these podcasts because you can get inflection and tone, so it's even better than a blog post, which is more flat. So I love video. You can make a heart connection. You can look into someone's eyes. There's something that I just love about the medium. But it is more work intensive because you got to have your hair somewhat, presentable, and like I got to put on makeup and, and it is so visual, sometimes you're just like, I'm not in the mood, it can be intense too. So I always tell people when you do a video, first of all, you'll get so much better. I mean, if you go back to my very early videos, they were terrible. I had like no inflection. I literally talk like this, it was so bad. Okay. So practice makes better, right? Practice makes perfect or whatever. And I always tell people too, you got to rank up your energy by like 50%. So you're going to feel completely obnoxious when you're filming, but you got to overdo it because it doesn't pick up on video. So if you just act like normal, which is like, some animation, some, inflection, it comes out like you're really, really just didn't have your coffee or something. You know what I mean? So you always have to rank it up. That's just how video translates. And then I pretend that I'm talking to someone that I love, so I envision Jesus because I love him. And I just pretend like I'm talking to him. And so it helps if you think of you're just speaking to one person, one heart, one face, make it someone you love and feel totally comfortable with. And that really helps to melt the fear, the insecurity, the, self-consciousness.
Well, and 7 years in, I don't know how many videos. Do you know how many videos?
I think it's like 300. It's over 300. I'm not sure. Michael would know. I don't know, frankly, off the top of my head.
So
but it's over 300.
Years. Wow. Over 300 videos. I guess I want to know, what have you learned from that? Like in terms of what surprised you? I'm pretty sure 7 years ago when you started putting up pregnancy videos, you just did not envision where you are today.
Yeah. I think what is surprising, I hear a lot of times on YouTube, like, oh my gosh, there's trolls and there's so many mean people and da-da. I think the thing that surprises me the most is how loving people are. You know what I mean? And that there are really lots of good people out there. And there's lots of people who want to connect and want to grow and are trying to do the best for themselves and their family. And I have been blessed that our community is like so encouraging and positive. And I have not made a video in a really long time because of this book. Like I could not do this book and do videos. Like I think my whole, I would not parent, you know what I mean? Like I would have no time. So I had to like make some choices and it was hard. But our community is so loving and like understanding. And so I think that's the thing that has surprised me the most is like, I don't see a ton of troll activity. Now in certain videos, like we've got a poop video, which gets some very interesting comments. I'll tell you that much. But we were kind of asking for it. You know what I mean? Some of it is like, you're kind of asking for it. But for the most part, people are just really kind. So I think that's been the really, and again, I feel like with video, sometimes you can put up a Facebook blurb and people take it the wrong way or it's read, in between the lines. I've had sometimes where I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I do that or whatever. But with video, it's a lot more forgiving because they can feel your, you know what I mean? Like your energy and your intention, and it just creates a more forgiving experience. That's been my great awareness and what I've really been surprised about through all these years. So
from all the years, all the kind of iterations that you've made now with your book, what are some of the most important messages that you have for the women listening? Like what are the biggest takeaways, most powerful things that you want to share?
Well, I would say, first of all, being a mother is such a sacred role and such a sacred gift, if we choose it, and so I just love being a mother, and I just salute all the mothers out there who are in the trenches and loving on people. And even if you don't have biological children, I think as women, we are nurturers and we comfort and we bring life and we bring love, and it's such a sacred role. So I just love women and I love the journey that we're on, and I love being a parent. To me, it is kind of like a calling. Like it's my greatest joy. It's very difficult. It will turn you upside down, right? I mean, I will never sleep again, but I would never I would never say no to it. It really is a blessing. And so I just love to encourage other moms, like, keep doing what you're doing. Like, you are changing the world, by being on the floor, playing trains, when you'd rather like be looking at People magazine or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of sacrifices we make on a daily basis, but it all adds up because you are creating citizens of the world who can love people and connect with people and make the world a better place. So that's what I would say to women, and that's what I would say to mothers. And in terms of a natural pregnancy and birth, you've got it. You can do this thing. And even if you give it your all and it ends up with a surgical birth, there's ways you can naturalize that. Like nothing is ever lost. You know what I mean? So there's always redemption. There's always a way that we can optimize it. So just get educated, empower yourself, learn about it. You can check out our landing page. It's mamanaturalbook.com to learn more about it. But just know that there's always choices, and you've got this, and your body was designed to give birth. And it is a rite of passage that I want as many women as possible who want it to experience it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as a way, so to kind of bring full circle my backwards analogies here, starting with birth and going to pregnancy. So now this podcast episode is very much focused on pregnancy, on birth, and, getting through that process gracefully and lovingly. But for the women who are listening, who are still in that process, whether they're thinking of pregnancy in the future and not trying actively, or for my listeners who are or have been trying actively for a while, what are some of the biggest takeaways or just biggest words of encouragement that you would want to share?
Well, I think if you have that mama heart, and that is a desire of your heart, that you will succeed. For some of us, it takes longer than others. I read a story just recently about a woman for 10 years tried, and she just gave birth to her child. So don't lose hope. There is always hope. There is always, I just really believe, like, if that is a burning desire of your heart, it will be fulfilled. So keep at it. Keep your mind open to what ways you might need to change, or what, sometimes it's just emotional things we have got to work through. Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's a timing issue. Sometimes it's part of our gifting that we'll give to the world, because we can now have compassion for others who have walked through that and have wanted and longed and haven't been able to have that, experience. Celebrate the love that you do have in your life. If you have a loving partner, what a gift. I've got friends who are in their 40s and they're not married and they long for that. So finding the gratitude, finding the blessings in today is always a great way to live. And I think too, like, finding ways to open myself up to life today, Can you play with your nieces and nephews? Can you volunteer at a school? I think somehow just being around that youthful energy, being around young ones, I feel like it does a work in us that prepares us to be a mother. So those are things that have helped me, I guess, and helped others that I know. And I know you've got a ton of great resources. We've got a post that has some really unusual tips and tricks for, which of course you would only find at Mom Natural, for improving your fertility. So check those out. But I just would say, don't give up hope. Keep at it. That seed will be planted and you will have that fruit in your life. You will experience that joy of being a mother.
Oh, I think that is, well, first of all, beautiful and just a lovely place to end. I really, what you said, I really resonated with. And I'm really glad that we're able to make that space for those positive words of affirmation to all the women listening. Mm. And so, Genevieve, thank you so much for being on the show.
I want to give you a hug.
Okay, we're doing a virtual hug.
Like, you are my people, even though I can't, I haven't met you in person, so I love it. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
Well, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. It's so great having a chance to chat with you. And I'm just going to keep saying it. You're super funny, like in person too. If we met in person, we would have a hoot. I know it.
I bet we would too.
Well, could you share with our listeners? So I know you mentioned the book landing page, but yeah. I would love if you shared with your listeners your website and also your YouTube channel and all the places.
Sure. So it's just Mama Natural. So it's MAMA and then natural. So it's mamanatural.com. We have an Instagram channel, which is Mama Natural. We have a YouTube channel, which is Mama Natural. And we have a Facebook page, which is Mama Natural. And we really do focus in on the pregnancy, the birth, like kind of that window of a woman's life. I would say like the first year before she gets pregnant to the second year after she has a baby, that kind of window. But we also have tons of other health things like how to whiten your teeth naturally, how to have a good poop, what's a balanced diet, just other general kind of health tips and tricks. One of my favorite things that we do right now, especially because we've been slowing down the videos, which we will be ramping back up, and we already have started to. But we have something called 3 Things for Thursday, and it's like my favorite. It's like a little love letter to email subscribers, and I just share 3 tips or tricks for a healthy, happy life. And so this isn't, you don't have to be pregnant. You don't have to be a mom. It's just for anyone who wants to live a healthier, happier life. So we send that out every Thursday. You can sign up for that on our website, mamanatural.com.
Oh, well, thank you again, Genevieve. It was my pleasure. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/133. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Genevieve. It was so much fun to have a chance to chat with her. I kept saying over and over again, "You're so funny," because she kept making me laugh. And it was a lot of fun to have the opportunity to chat with her. I'm really excited for her new book. I think it's really great that she was able to do that. When you see it, you'll understand what I mean by saying that it was a labor of love. It's beautifully formatted and also full of lots of really important and useful information, and from a different perspective. So from the perspective of, like her name is Mama Natural. So really great resource there. And there's so many different things that came up as we were talking today, talking about natural birth and all those different types of topics. And I think if you're interested or wanting to kind of learn more, there was a really interesting and powerful book that I read in my early 20s. I probably read this book when I was, say, like 20 or 21, called Misconceptions. And off the top of my head, I don't remember who wrote it, but I will link to this book in the show notes so that you can take a peek. But that book really painted an interesting picture of how the interventions that are applied in birth can lead to other interventions and kind of lead you along this line that makes it more likely to end up needing more and more significant interventions. And I remember after reading that book, I had a really clear idea in my mind, of what type of birth that I wanted. But even with that in mind, one of my very best friends is a labor and delivery nurse. And so she came from a completely different perspective. And what I learned from her was that in her experience, which is really interesting, the women who came in to birth their babies, so they came in labor, who had the most specific, rigid birth plan ideas were the ones that often had the most difficulties. And I often think of birth as this beautiful metaphor for losing control of your life in a way, because when that's that kind of magical point in time when you become a mother and all of a sudden life really does change. And so based on the 2 learnings that I had there, I always had it in my mind what my preference would be in terms of having a home birth, with minimal, if no interventions. But I also knew and had to be open to the possibility that really and truly I can't control the outcome, and I don't know how this baby's going to come into the world. And so, I kind of geared it in my favor. I thought, okay, if I can be as far away from the hospital as possible, if I can have a midwife, and if I can have the baby at home, then at least I'm increasing my chances that I will have the least amount of interventions. But with that said, my midwife and I talked at length about the different reasons why I might have to be transferred to the hospital, or the different situations where a different type of birth plan would be put into place. And so I knew about those things, was aware of them, was in a way open to it, but still, had my preference to have a home birth. And I think that Genevieve points at a really important aspect of this process in her book and in the conversation that we had, which is that you can only make those types of informed choices when you actually have the information that you need to make those choices. So resources like the book I mentioned, Misconceptions, and also the documentary, if you've never seen the documentary Ricky Lake did called The Business of Being Born, it's on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, it's really easy just to pop in and watch it if it's available in your country. But I think that those types of resources are kind of a good place to start, at least to see the different options you have as far as birth is concerned. So I hope you enjoyed the episode with Genevieve and I. It was so much fun to record with her, and really and truly I appreciate all of you for sharing the show, for talking about it with your friends, with your family members. It makes such a huge difference in increasing the number of women who are being exposed to this information. You're all helping me on my mission to really bring this information to women all over the world, because as you all know by listening to the show, it's so important that we know our options and have access to reliable information about our fertility, about our health, and how those things intersect. And as you also know, we're kind of limited in public access to this information. So the more you share it, the more women will know. And I really appreciate all of you helping to do that. If you're a brand new listener to the show, make sure to subscribe. I release an episode every week, and so you'll be notified as soon as a new episode is released. And of course, I also have a back catalog. So if this is the first episode that you listen to, I have a ton of fertility awareness specific episodes throughout. We've done those and various different health topics. So it may be easiest even just to do a search within the podcast itself to find the topics that you're most interested in. But there's lots of great episodes for you to listen to. And if this is the first time that you're listening to the podcast, welcome. I want to invite you to join us in the Fertility Friday Facebook group. So I've started a private Facebook group for the Fertility Friday community, and we talk about a lot of great topics in there. We talk about fertility awareness related topics, fertility, hormonal contraceptives, and after this episode, I'm sure we're going to be talking about natural birth and preparing for pregnancy. So if you want to chat more about this episode in the community, then just head over to fertilityfriday.com/community, and you'll receive your invitation to join the group from there. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate all of you for letting me be part of your day and spending some time, hanging out with me and listening to the show and supporting the show. So thanks again. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.